I think that's always been reflected in our investments on there.
Absolutely.
Everybody understands that we've got a debt out there. Unfortunately, not too many people understand why we have the debt because they're arguing to repeat the process. But that aside, none of this can be done without making some investment in it. And so we set our priorities. I mean, if we're going to start cutting workforce investment, workforce skills training, cutting education or whatever, we're going to be doing the opposite of what China's doing, Japan, Germany, Singapore, and all those countries who are investing heavily in there and moving forward. So it's going to be an important national debate on that, and we're going to have, I think, good metrics, good numbers of how workforce investment boards and these programs have actually got people back to work.
I agree with that. I think the performance, generating performance, showing how you're getting people back to work is going to be an important part of this. But I think the second part is we haven't done a good job in metrics on the groups that we bailed out.
You're talking the banks, Wall Street,
and kind of the
always distinguish between Wall Street banks and our community banks.
Right. No, I mean these financial
right.
institutions that I think most economists don't even understand anymore.
Right.
And I take a look at this and I just think if we took some fraction of that money and put it in some of these human resource investments, and I don't just mean about kids. When you're looking at people in their 40s and 50s, their expectations of staying in the job market have really changed a lot. Values of the houses have gone down, their retirement funds have gone down. So as a result, we're seeing very big changes in patterns of people's labor force attachment. The labor force growth in the next 10, 12 years in Massachusetts and country is all going to be among people 55 and older. They're staying in a lot longer, and that means the role of training, retraining, reskilling in community colleges and adult programs going to get a lot more important for them as well. So this just isn't a kid's issue.
No.
This is everybody.
No, and it's interesting how when you get to the funding issue, we talk in different directions. We're cutting the wrong things and moving it and moving it over to places where we don't need it. But when I spoke this morning, Ronald, remember at one point I said, everybody's going to that 12% of the budget. Which is non-defense discretion, so-called discretionary spending is education, health, job training, labor, those types of issues. And if you cut the entire 12%, you wouldn't even make a dent. Right. You make a small dent in your. But we have to look at the whole budget, includes the Defense Department, and we have to look at some revenue raise at this point. And I know in London, I think it is, they have a 0.5% transaction assessment on the stock market.
Yes.
People's transfer of things. We did that in this country, raise $170 billion. And the one thing it might do is bring some stability to the market, stop the casino atmosphere where they plug into a computer and churn all day, on that basis. But there are ways that we can make sure we take care of these programs. There are always better efficiencies. We always have to make sure that we've got the right providers that are doing the right job. But I question, whether, taking deep and desperate cuts in these areas at this point in time, people out of work, makes any sense.
Part of the reason why you need to really be concerned about this is that the number of people that have been out of work for a year or longer has reached this historical, almost staggering number. We now have 3 million people in the United States who have been out of work for 53 weeks or more. Yeah. When I was a kid, this goes way back, but we used to refer to long-term unemployment as people out of work for 15 or more weeks. Right. And now, you get basically 15% of all the unemployed, 15 million people. You get actually about 30% of them have been out out of more than a year or so. And that's tough stuff. When you're out, it's kind of like the need for retooling, re-education when you're not that long becomes really important. Yeah. So we really need to figure this out.
I ran into a gentleman up in Gloucester when I stopped in for the one-stop satellite up there, and he was about 58, and he'd been out of work for 2 years, and he just found out he had prostate cancer. Now, it's almost a direct, on point to what happened to my father at about the same age. And I think I can remember, what it did to him, to your psyche, to your confidence.
Absolutely,
I mean, it's just devastating. You multiply that by that many people who are out there, and as a national issue, I mean, this is what we ought to be talking about.
Right, and when you think about that, the psyche of losing your job, and then the decisions that you have to make when that happens. Right. What do I do about my pension? What do I do about my 401k? How am I going to be able to retire? What am I going to do between now and when I can retire?
Most of these people have already wiped out their 401k.
Right.
And now they're worried about how are they going to keep any insurance. One of the reasons we passed the health care bill was now they won't have to worry about that. We'll find a way to do it, and we'll make improvements in the bill. But this is so important. If we think back before all the craziness in the debate about death panels that never were and things of that nature, it was a moral question. Why should 30+ million people not have health insurance? And then when you put that into this particular employment context, all these people without a job, it gets even more intense. Why should they not have health coverage? Somebody gets sick in their family because they happen to be out of work at no fault of their own. So all these things sort of tie together and sort of giving you hopefully some sort of a propulsion back into a job, but the security of knowing you keep your family intact and stable in the interim.
If there's the system to help you go back into that labor market. I think we talked earlier about innovation and the increase in the sophistication of equipment and new technology deployed by manufacturing companies. Well, that takes somebody equally sophisticated and equally up on that system. Even the buildings. Many workforce boards across the country are working with building maintenance staff because now technology controls the air conditioning and the heating in the building and the heating exchanging and all of that. I was in a city not too long ago. The lights in their office towers are timed to the bus schedule. So that all takes somebody understanding how all of that complex equipment works together, and that takes training and retraining.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left to go, but I want to mention the Recovery and Reinvestment Act made a large emphasis on youth employment. What are some of the numbers, Paul, about how many people are unemployed, young people?
Well, when you take a look, if you go back to 1998, 1999, about half of kids 16 and 19 had a job. And last month when the job report came out, it went down to 25%. So it's just, young kids. And when I say this, the second thing you're seeing happen is kids actually coming out of college now, they're finding work, but it tends to be non-college work. So they're bumping the high school grad kids out. So it's a really tough cycle that kids are in. So the teen young adult labor market is particularly hard hit.
Are we tooled up for this under the current Workforce Investment Act? Ron, are the things that we ought to be doing to sort of improve on what we're doing to focus on all these large issues?
Well, I think with youth, a number of the workforce boards across the country would talk about we need expanded youth programs. We need youth programs, we need internships, we need summer youth employment. As Paul mentioned, when we talk to small businesses, and there are 12,000 of them across the country that sit on the workforce boards, they talk about the need for a worker to come on and be productive. And that means that they need to have that work ethic. They need to understand what it means to go to work. And everything tells us that the best way to learn how to go to work and be at work is to
go to work.
Go to work. Yeah. So I think with youth, we really have to rethink, are we going to lose this generation or not?
And I think, internships and apprenticeships going to be an important part of a lot of that.
Absolutely.
I know, Paul, you've been engaged with the co-op programs, both at Northeastern and Drexel.
Definitely.
Great idea. We put some in the language in the higher education bill. We reauthorized it just recently to get more institutions the ability to get that process in mind. We have to focus on this issue. I'm always stunned when we come out with other agenda in the middle of this situation. It's so important to families on that. I want to thank both of you for the work that you do in this area. You've been steadfast in it. You've been really diligent in all the work you did and helpful on that. So people in your own communities, but people nationwide, owe a debt of gratitude to both of you for it. I want to thank you for spending the time with us here in this show. We have lots more work to do and a lot more to talk about, but unfortunately not much more time to do it in. So thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.